Makita ninyo ang ako ang screen? Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Jonah, Dulce. Thank you for that. All right. Presuming that everybody is is able to see my screen, allow me to begin with our discussion. So today, the primary context here is how to begin with ourselves by identifying what are these speech contexts. And eventually, class, we realize that we need to understand these speech contexts because this will help us, identify and explain. In explaining what speech contexts are, we are able to help ourselves determine how best we are able to communicate by knowing the different contexts thereof. All right. So in this particular lesson, here is an essential question that I would like you to anchor our discussion in. Why do we need better communication with ourselves and with others? Yun na nga, sinabi ko, di ba, at the start of our class, we begin with ourselves. When you want to venture into different courses in college, into different professions later on in life, or basically with how you live your life, you always begin with yourself. You always check and assess yourself, reflect, and realize whether or not you're going to be fulfilled and happy. At this age, at our tender age as youth, young adults, it's going to be very, very ideal. Let me just say that. And it's also going to be very confusing at times what we really wanted to do. So it is essential, that we communicate with ourselves. Why? Because by knowing ourselves and how we communicate with ourselves, how we arrange our thoughts, how we try to navigate through the uncertainties, the confusions, the conflicts, later on the noises, then we are able to understand, how communicating to ourselves is efficient, and then later on will help us communicate with others better. No? So in this particular lesson, here are some vocabulary words that we are going to encounter as we go along with our discussion. So I want you to take note with these words and the key words, the significant words that when you hear these words, you associate it with these vocabulary words. Okay. First word is the word context. This means the situation surrounding a particular event. Example, the student handbook was drafted based on the specific context of the school setup. Another is the word gesture or gestures. This means the bodily movements that emphasize important ideas or feelings. Example, he usually employs gestures in order to emphasize how he feels about a given idea. And then third, proximity. Proximity means the quality or state of being near. Okay, near, duol. Okay, example. The proximity of the curtains to the fireplace was a cause of concern for the safety inspector. Okay. Another word is the word tailor. This means to make or adapt something to suit a need or purpose. Okay. Example, the producers tailored the movie to fit the taste of both children and adults. And lastly is the word spontaneous. This means to produced or done without being planned. Wala giplanuhan. It's on the spot. Example, Heidi, being a free spirit, often does spontaneous activities like traveling to new places without creating an itinerary first. That's very interesting. Moadto kag, say for example, moadto kag Ilocos without knowing where you're going to go in Ilocos. Anyway, so these are the different set of vocabulary words that you are going to encounter as we go along with our discussion. Make sure that we remember them so that when we are able to come across or encounter them in our discussions, we get to what do we call this? Understand best the concept that or the lesson that we are studying. Okay, now let's try to learn about this speech context. Speech context class refers to the situation or environment and the circumstances in which the communication occurs. Meaning to say, kung moingon ta karon og speech context, sama sa tong vocabulary, sitwasyon ni siya, the situation surrounding a particular event. So in this regard, it is the situation or the environment and the circumstances in which the communication occurs. There are three main types of speech context, but I am not saying that it is limited to only these three. These are the three main types of speech context. First is intrapersonal speech context, meaning to say when we say intra, it is in yourself, intrapersonal. Within one's self. Interpersonal now is an interaction, is an exchange with other people aside from yourself. That's interpersonal speech context. And public communication is an example of what we are doing during mass gatherings, during political rallies, during birthday parties, or during meetings, conferences, etc., etc. That's an example of public communication. Sir, kaniya tong klase karon sir, unsa man ni siya, interpersonal or public communication? Considering that in your class you are say 30, almost 35, no? So this could be an example, or this is an example of public communication. So unsa din ang interpersonal? If you ask me, well, there are a lot of definitions, but if you ask me, interpersonal speech is with regards to two or more, 2 to 5, 2 to 10, kana interpersonal na siya. But if communication is going through, say, for example, 15 to 20 individuals at a particular time given, that's already considered public communication. Kaya daghan naman kay mo. Interpersonal man good could be a conversation with another, conversation with your best friend, conversation with a classmate, conversation with the teacher, conversation with your parents, etc., etc. That's interpersonal. It's a little, it's not really, say for example, a huge gathering, but it's more of an intimate, no, discourse with a particular individual. So those are the different or the three main types of speech context. In the next lessons that we're going to have, I'll just give you a I'll just preempt, no. In the next lessons that we're going to have, we are going to discuss further what are these three main types of speech context: intrapersonal, interpersonal, and public communication. So as we continue with this lesson, we are going to talk now about the different characteristics of speech contexts. First, the number of participants. Sabi ko nga kanina, it is considered intra, inter, and public communication depending on the number of participants. Kapag ikaw lang isa, you're talking to yourself, that's considered intrapersonal. Kapag ka naman dalawa kayo, tatlo, apat, that's considered interpersonal. But if it is a group or a crowd already, say 10 to 15 individuals, or 20, or 100, or even 1,000 in a particular stadium, no, or in one setting, in a particular Zoom meeting or in an FB Live, umabot ka ng 1,000 na nanonood, that's considered public communication already. It now depends, or it now varies on the number of participants. Next characteristic that we are going to consider is the physical proximity of the participants in relation to one another. Diba? When we say proximity, it is talking about nearness. Ang kadulon ninyo, nearness, inyong distance. So physical proximity now is given a great consideration as a characteristic of speech context because it tells us the type of speech context that is being or that comes into play. Of course, when you're alone, ikaw ra isa nagbarog or naglingkod ganha, of course, that's considered ikaw raman isa. Kung duha mo nga nagtapad, nga nagtabi, or duha mo nga nagatbang sa lamesa, nga nagtabi, nagkaon, that's interpersonal. Say, for example, in a long table, you are 6, 7, or 8. That's still considered interpersonal. But if you are in a classroom, there is a platform given, a whiteboard, say mong tungod, and your participants or your audience are seated in arranged rows and columns, then that's already called public communication. It is now a variety of the physical proximity of the listener and the receiver, right? The channel used for the communication. Of course, we know already what are the different channels that we use when we communicate. Pagka intrapersonal, it's more of yourself, whether you record it on your own, you record your video, you record your voice, etc., or you write, etc., etc. You write a diary or a journal, etc. Kapag ka interpersonal, it's more intimate, in the sense that dalawa lang kayo, tatlo lang kayo, and then you are comfortable with whatever position or whatever arrangement that you have. Okay? Pagka public communication, there is now the sense of formality and an organized manner to get the message across. Okay? That's now differing on the channel that is being used in the communication. Okay, kindly mute your microphone, please. Okay, and lastly is the immediacy of the exchange. Immediacy meaning to say, unsa ka, how immediate is the exchange needed? Okay, so that is also a characteristic of speech context. Now, here are different categories of communication. First, we have formal communication. When we say formal communication, it is largely referring to an event or a formal body where you need to execute a particular behavior that showcases that you are ready to listen, you're showing respect, and you're being polite to the speaker, and that your gestures are, needless to say, calculated. Say, for example, what to kagnisa. Diba? When you go to church, regardless of your religious denomination, when you go to church, there is a certain behavior that is expected from you. Say you sit on the chairs, you place your hands on your lap, and then you listen to the wali of the priest, the pastor, the whoever it might be that is giving the church leader, etc. And then you stand, and then you sing some practices of worship. There is karang gospel ba worship yung sayo-sayo, we clap our hands, we snap our fingers, etc., etc., to exude the feeling that we are having while we are at church. But there are some, like the Catholic, is very formal. When you stand, you just sing, you ready to dance or whatever, and then you just sit. Ano lang, that's what we call formal communication. There is a specific behavior that is expected, and that behavior is calculated, to say the most. And then informal class, that's what we do at home. Excuse me for a while, huh? Going back, so when we say informal communication, so yun na yung ginagawa natin sa bahay. We are very comfortable with how we sit, with how we talk. No particular behavior that sense you need to do it like this way. Of course, when you talk with the elders, kailangan, of course, with respeto, polite, pero magtawanan kayo, you're very comfortable to talk about anything and everything under the heat of the sun, etc., etc. So that's what they call informal. Kung napud sa barkada, kung nasa kwan, even when you are in supposedly formal places, like mga coffee shop na supposedly hilom, trust me when I say nga, expectation or the stereotype is hilom. Pero arang ka mga banha, labi nag mga senior high school magtapok, di ko magsaba pag sa green coffee. I always stay there. Dili na gid ko angayan mo ingog usually class because I stay there almost every day because I attend my classes there. I stay there when I have my classes at night. And on weekends, I also stay there to prepare for my classes and to study my lessons in advance, both here in law school and diari sa akong ginatudlo sa inyo. No? So, naku mo observe yun. When senior high school students go there to do projects, kunwari, mag-study, etc., etc., gadaghan ang tabi ni kamo po, sir. Yes, but we try to do something productive with our time. Kagahapon, I noticed that there were some students that were really occupying a huge space at the back. They were not causing any nuances, but because they were also doing their own thing, no? Pero on my end, parang kasaba yun sa mga estudyante. And, people were also studying ba, having classes, etc. So Arako, these students are also very, very unruly sometimes kasi nga, it is informal. It's not bad, ha? Unruly is not considered already bad diretso, no? But informal siya in the sense that they were very comfortable with talking loudly, perhaps trying to stay sensitive to the people that are studying. But then again, pagka informal na gani ang communication ninyo, usually the tabi really goes on and on and on, uh, katawa mugtaman diha, bahak-hakay mugtaman diha, etc., etc. So all of us can relate to that, and all of us can also observe no formal communication as a category. So here are examples of the different speech contexts. Let's begin with the intrapersonal communication. So as you can see in the example, it is an entry of a diary. So gisot niya there, dear diary. Di ba, when we were younger, I don't know if you were subjected to this also, but when we were younger, we were supposedly to have journal entries. Somehow we called it journal entries. And I think every week we needed to have at least 5 entries, yeah, to practice writing, to practice grammar, etc., etc. And we needed to talk about ourselves. Tapos before, our English teacher would read it. Kasi nga secret lang, it's about you and the teacher. Kaya siya lang ang makabasa. So I would write there, I would write my heart out. And then mag-comment si teacher nimo. So it was also like trying to let somebody know how you were feeling, what were your struggles, what were your happiness, victories in your own little way. And then kamo lang, that was an intimate thing. But when you are with yourself and not subjected by the school or any particular task, you can always have this dear diary. Say, for example, the past few days have been tough for me. Since my parents' separation, I've had to live with just my mom. I've also had to transfer to a new school. Ana. So, dagan siya ginahatag diri nga mga secrets niya about siyang self. Pero nobody, no, aside from, or nobody outside of the particular circle can read it because it is for his or her own sake, right? And that's something that is still applicable even up to this day. You write something there to keep track of your mental health. You write something there to keep track of your progress. You write something there to keep track of your authenticity. It's very important and it is still very useful. Ikaw, sir, do you keep a diary? Plus, dako ko nga tao, I'm very tall, 5'11". But yes, I write a diary. Not every day. I don't do it every single day nga magsuwat jud ko, magkuan jud ko. But there were times, especially last year, that I had to monitor my mental health and I need to be very, very, what's the right term? I needed to I needed to make sure that I was giving attention to my mental health aside from my physical health, because it was kanait pag una siya class. When your mental health is affected, it will result also, there are results in your physical health, there are also results with etc., etc. No? So I kept a notebook. Sulatan ako siya mga plans, contact informations nako and etc. For me not to be forget, for me not to forget. Kaya I'm very forgetful. So what I did was at the back of it, ginasulatan pa ako siya listahan sa ko expenses. Kay grabe pud ko maka gasto. So I keep track of my expenses, no. Karon what I did was at the back of the notebook, I just simply write mga 2 sentence, 3 sentences. Pinakataas na siguro tong 4 sentences na ko of how I felt at that particular period. And it did not happen every day nga magsulat jud ko. Say for example, kasi I write almost every week, I try to check it, to monitor if I'm still spending within my means or I'm going beyond my means, no? Na pa ba ko'y mabilin nga money if I budget it my money this way, etc., etc. And where am I going to get income to pay for this? Ganito ganyan. That's how I budget my money. So when I look at it, the list, tapos I try to figure out, ay hala, problema, ma-stress ka kasi hala, dili din ni mao, hala, wala din ni naabot nga money, ay hala, dili din ni enough, uy, sobra da ako nagasto. So right after I try to settle, no, my budget or my I call it financial management. I go to the back of the notebook and write what I feel at that day. Just not to complain, not to just parehaani, not to complain, no, and say how sad, etc., etc. But I just simply try to put there something authentic. That's why I call it the authentic side of the listahan ng utang. I just simply write there, I feel stressed because I don't know where to get this. But I always end it with a very positive note that it will be okay, that it will be solved in its own way, that I just need to trust the Lord's timing, the Lord's plan, etc., etc. And I end it with 2 words. Sa sige na ko sulat class from, I think I started in September. Sa sige na ko sulat or August ba, I can't remember, basta during that period. Sa sige na ko sulat, sa sige na ko sulat, I developed in ending it with a short prayer. But in that short prayer, I don't ask, Lord, please give this to me, etc., etc. I just simply write a phrase, God provides. And guess what? Until karon nadala ko na siya. Now, when I feel stressed about, my budget not being enough, or when I feel thankful that I'm able to meet ends and to pay, and have extra money, I just simply write there, God provides. Because that's the truth. He provides for all our needs. So until now, I still keep the notebook. And then whenever not necessarily when I feel down or when I feel happy, at random times, when I open it, when pag kunwari, di masyadong busy and I'm trying to fix my stuff, manghipos ko gamit, makita na ko siya, I read it. And ako, hala, no, kabati isa kong grammar. Ay, makatawa ka na lang with how well you realize or how well you improve in 1 year sa imong sinulatan. So, ma-realize nimo ba nga with keeping track of these or with communicating with yourselves, and then you read it years later or months later, you're also able to realize na, hala no, sa una na problema day ko about this. Karon, gitawanan ko na lang kasi I know how to solve it, how to face it, na pag meron akong pera, hindi ubusin kaagad, na pagka meron akong plano, hindi i-push or i-pressure kaagad. I wait for the right timing. And that timing is not really necessary according to ours. No, it could be that you wait for a couple of months or you wait for a couple of weeks before that particular thing happens, etc., etc. So I learn a lot from that. And that is what I call intrapersonal communication. You communicate with yourself and you try to understand whether or not you are improving depending on your pace, right? How do you do that? Let me share again my experience on that. Since, di ba, I shared that I have this journal entries that siguro mahitabo siya every after 15, every after 20 days, every after inana kadugay ang ako. So karon when I look back at it, I try to reflect. Where was I a year ago? Was I doing better or am I falling on the same pattern again? So a year ago, I was nag-workout ko because it was lockdown, lockdown man. So wala kay mahimo sa iyong balay. So just simply work out. I was saving money. But I was still also spending with the unnecessaries. This year, I'm prioritizing in investing on this. I'm prioritizing in making sure I have this na gamiton ako sa work or gamiton ako sa school or sa balay, etc., etc. And that helps you monitor ba whether you are progressing or whether you are stagnant, ipabili lang kaganha, wala kay improvement, etc., or whether you are going back to that particular pattern which you do not like. So that really helps in keeping track of it all. So that's an example of intrapersonal communication. So why are you emphasizing this? Because sabi ko nga at the start, we need to focus with ourselves, right? So this could be a very huge help. Labi na if we are kana bitaw maulawon, mo share sa ubang tao, you can share it with yourself. You can write it down. Trust me, writing, not just typing it. Writing is very, very therapeutic. Whether you write it in a one whole sheet of paper, a notebook, etc. Basta you exercise writing, it's very therapeutic, I tell you. Another is an example of interpersonal communication. So here's a conversation between Tess and Julia. So Tess and Julia are talking about a particular topic, etc., etc. We've been discussing communications, dialogues for the past lessons. So you can read the communication. Pwede mo mag-marites ko unsay gistoryahan ni Tess ug ni Julia. Okay, but siguro the Tess there is short for marites. Kidding aside though, here's an example of public communication. Books and Burglars by Mark Twain. Okay, this is something that is describing a particular scene, of what happened with the topic of books and burglars. This is an excerpt, obviously, from Mark Twain's novel. So you can check this out and you can read this one. Mataas ni siya, pero excerpt lang yung kinuha natin dito. Okay. So this is called public communication because they are catering to a lot of people, not necessarily in the literature per se, but when you write books, manggod, that's an example of public on books, novels, literary piece that you publish. and you make available for people to read. That's considered public communication because majority no of people can read it, majority of people can see it. Okay, so those are the different examples of the three main types of speech context. Now, what I want you to do is I want you, no, sorry, not this one. Ayan. I want you to make this assignment. You collect materials such as newspapers, magazines, scissors, glue or paste, coloring materials, short band paper. Take note, itong pinaka-importante, the short band paper. What you're going to do with these materials is that you are going to create a collage showing one specific type of speech communication. Label your work with the type of speech context your collage is exhibiting. Say for example, ang collage ninyo is interpersonal or intrapersonal. So you just simply write there intrapersonal communication or you write there interpersonal communication. So I'm going to be taking a screenshot of this para ma-paste ko sa ating GC. And I want you to submit this one. Say for example, I think you can do this by tomorrow. I want you to submit this one by tomorrow as well. Okay? So para meron kayong gagawin for your asynchronous classes tomorrow, I want you to submit this one tomorrow. That's Tuesday, September 27, 2022. No particular deadline as long as within the day. Lagay na lang natin until 5 p.m. Sir, how are we able to submit this one? You're going to take a picture of this, okay? And then I will have a particular folder or file that you can upload it. But the material, the hard copy, you place it in your notebook. Now, in closing class, I would like to end with this question. Being future professionals, how can the understanding of different speech contexts help you in establishing better communication? Okay, so this is something that you can answer with your own self. So I thank everybody for joining me this morning. Since we do not have enough time already, you can now go to your next classes. God bless and enjoy your Monday, everyone.